World itself is not an innerworldly being, and yet it determines innerworldly beings to such an extent that they can only be encountered and discovered and show themselves in their being insofar as there is world. But how is there world? If Dasein is ontically constituted by being in the world, and if an understanding of the being of itself belongs just as essentially to it, even if that understanding is quite indeterminate, does it not then have an understanding of world, a pre-ontological understanding which lacks and can dispense with explicit ontological insights? Does not something like world show itself to being in the world taking care of the beings encountered within the world, that is, their inner worldliness? Does not this phenomenon come into view pre-phenomenologically? Is it not always in view without requiring a thematically ontological interpretation? In the scope of its heedful absorption in useful things at hand, does not Dasein have a possibility of being in which, together with the inner-worldly beings taken care of, their worldliness is illuminated in a certain way? If such possibilities of being of Dasein can be shown in its heedful dealings, a path is open to pursue the phenomenon thus illuminated and to attempt, so to speak, to place it and interrogate the structures evident in it. Modes of taking care belong to the everydayness of being in the world, modes which let the beings taken care of be encountered in such a way that the worldly character of inner-worldly beings appears. Beings nearest at hand can be met up with in taking care of things as unusable, as improperly adapted for their specific use. Tools turn out to be damaged, their material unsuitable. In any case, a useful thing of some sort is at hand here. But we discover the unusability not by looking and ascertaining properties, but rather by paying attention to the dealings in which we use it. When we discover its unusability, the thing becomes conspicuous. Conspicuousness presents the thing at hand in a certain unhandiness. But this implies that what is unusable just lies there. It shows itself as a thing of use which has this or that appearance, and which is always also objectively present with this or that outward appearance in its handiness. Mere objective presence makes itself known in the useful thing only to withdraw again into the handiness of what is taken care of, that is, of what is being put back into repair. This presence of what is unusable still does not lack all handiness whatsoever. The useful thing thus present is still not a thing which just occurs somewhere. The damage to the useful thing is still not a mere change in the thing, a change of qualities simply occurring in something present. But such heedful dealings do not just come up against unusable things within what is already at hand. They also find things which are missing, which are not only not handy, but not at hand at all. When we come upon something unhandy, our missing it in this way again discovers what is at hand in a kind of only being present. When we notice its unhandiness, what is at hand enters the mode of obtrusiveness. The more urgently we need what is missing, and the more truly it is encountered in its unhandiness, all the more obtrusive does what is at hand become, such that it seems to lose the character of handiness. It reveals itself as something merely present, which cannot be budged without the missing element. As a deficient mode of taking care of things, the helpless way in which we stand before it discovers the mere being present of what is at hand. In dealing with the world taken care of, what is unhandy can be encountered not only in the sense of something unusable or completely missing, but as something unhandy which is not missing at all and not unusable, but gets in the way of taking care of things. That to which taking care cannot turn, for which it has no time, is something unhandy in the way of not belonging there, of not being complete. Unhandy things are disturbing, and make evident the obstinacy of what is initially to be taken care of before anything else. With this obstinacy, the presence of what is at hand makes itself known in a new way as the being of what is still present and calls for completion. The modes of conspicuousness, obtrusiveness, and obstinacy have the function of bringing to the fore the character of objective presence in what is at hand. What is at hand is not thereby observed and stared at simply as something present. The character of objective presence making itself known is still bound to the handiness of useful things. These still do not disguise themselves as mere things. Useful things become things in the sense of what one would like to throw away. But in this tendency to throw things away, what is at hand is still shown as being at hand in its unyielding objective presence. But what does this reference to the modified way of encountering what is at hand, a way in which its objective presence is revealed, mean for the clarification of the phenomenon of world? In the analysis of this modification, too, we are still involved with the being of inner-worldly being. We have not yet come any closer to the phenomenon of world. We have not yet grasped that phenomenon, but we now have the possibility of catching sight of it. In its conspicuousness, obtrusiveness, and obstinacy, what is at hand loses its character of handiness in a certain sense. But this handiness is itself understood, although not thematically, in dealing with what is at hand. It does not just disappear, but bids farewell, so to speak, in the conspicuousness of what is unusable. Handiness shows itself once again, and precisely in doing so the worldly character of what is at hand also shows itself, too. The structure of being of what is at hand, as a useful thing, is determined by references verweisung. The peculiar and self-evident in itself, and sich of the nearest things, is encountered when we take care of things, using them but not paying specific attention to them, while bumping into things that are unusable. Something is unusable. This means that the constitutive reference of the inordito to a what for has been disrupted. The references themselves are not observed, rather they are there, in our heedful adjustment to them. But in a disruption of reference in being unusable for, the reference becomes explicit. It does not yet become explicit as an ontological structure, but ontically for our circumspection, which gets annoyed by the damaged tool. This circumspect noticing of the reference to the particular what for makes the what for visible, and with it the context of the work, the whole workshop, as that in which taking care has always already been dwelling. The context of useful things is lit up, not as a totality never seen before, but as a totality that has continually been seen beforehand in our circumspection. But with this totality, world makes itself known. Similarly, when something at hand is missing whose everyday presence was so much a matter of course that we never even paid attention to it, this constitutes a breach in the context of references verweisungszusammenhang, discovered in circumspection. Circumspection comes up with emptiness, and now sees for the first time what the missing thing was at hand for wafer, and at hand with wamen. Once again, the surrounding world makes itself known. What appears in this way is not itself one thing at hand among others, and certainly not something objectively present which lies at the basis of the useful thing at hand. It is there before anyone has observed or ascertained it. It is itself inaccessible to circumspection insofar as circumspection concentrates on beings, but it is always already disclosed for that circumspection. To disclose, erschtlich ren, and disclosedness are used as technical terms in what follows and mean to unlock, aufschließen, to be open, Aufgeschlossenheit. Thus to disclose never means anything like obtaining something indirectly by inference. That the world does not consist of what is at hand can be seen from the fact, among others, that when the world appears in the modes of taking care which we have just interpreted, what is at hand becomes deprived of its worldliness, so that it appears as something merely present. In order for useful things at hand to be encountered in their character of being in itself, in our everyday taking care of the surrounding world, the references and referential contexts in which circumspection is absorbed must remain non-thematic for that circumspection, and all the more so for a non-circumspect, thematic, abstract comprehension. The condition for the possibility of what is at hand not emerging from its inconspicuousness is that the world not announce itself. And this is the constitution of the phenomenal structure of the being in itself of these beings. Privative expressions such as inconspicuousness, unobtrusiveness, and non-obstinacy tell of a positive phenomenal character of the being of what is initially at hand. These negative prefixes express the character of keeping to itself of what is at hand. That is what we have in mind with being in itself, which, however, we initially typically ascribe to things objectively present as that which can be thematically ascertained. When we are primarily and exclusively oriented toward that which is objectively present, the in itself cannot be ontologically explained at all. However, we must demand an interpretation if the talk about in itself is to have any ontological importance. Mostly one appeals ontically and emphatically to this in itself of being, and with phenomenal justification. But this ontic appeal does not already fulfill the claim of the ontological statement presumably given in such an appeal. The foregoing analysis already makes it clear that the being in itself of inner-worldly beings is ontologically comprehensible only on the basis of the phenomenon of world. If, however, world can appear in a certain way, it must be disclosed in general. World is always already predisclosed for circumspect heedfulness together with the accessibility of inner-worldly beings at hand. Thus, world is something in which Warren Dasein as a being always already was, and world is that to which Dasein can always only come back whenever it explicitly moves towards something in some way. According to our foregoing interpretation, being in the world signifies the unthematic, circumspect absorption in the references constitutive for the handiness of the totality of useful thing. Taking care of things always already occurs on the basis of a familiarity with the world. In this familiarity, Dasein can lose itself in what it encounters within the world and be numbed by it. With what is Dasein familiar? Why can the worldly character of innerworldly beings appear? How is the referential totality Verweisungsgleichheit in which circumspection moves to be understood more precisely? When this totality is broken, the presence of beings is thrust to the fore. In order to answer these questions which aim at working out the phenomenon and problem of worldliness, a concrete analysis of the structures in whose context our questions are being asked is required.